There's a moment that almost nobody warned you about. You make the last payment. You hit submit, or you hand over the check, or you watch the balance flip to zero for the first time in years. And you sit there expecting to feel something enormous. Fireworks, a weight physically lifting from your shoulders, the kind of relief you've been picturing during every month you scrape together a little more to throw at the balance. And what you actually feel, at least for the first few hours, is something much quieter and stranger than that. It's closer to disorientation, like a sound you got so used to hearing that you stop noticing it, and then one day it stops, and the silence itself feels loud.
My name is Olivia, and I want to talk to you today about what actually happens after you pay off your last debt. Not the number stuff, not the credit score mechanics, the real stuff, the things that shift in your daily life, in your thinking, in your relationship with money and with yourself that nobody really describes because they're too busy celebrating the payoff moment. And I want to do this in a way that's honest because some of what changes is genuinely beautiful, and some of it is more complicated than the YouTube thumbnails make it look. But first, let me give you a picture of what you're actually climbing out of, because I don't think most people fully register the weight of what they've been carrying. As of the first quarter of 2026, total U.S. household debt reached a new record of $18.8 trillion, according to the New York Federal Reserve. The average American household is now carrying around $105,000 in total debt, according to Experian data. And that number broken out is credit cards, auto loans, student loans, personal loans, medical debt, all of it stacked on top of each other, each with its own minimum payment, its own interest rate, quietly eating into whatever you put toward it every month. The National Endowment for Financial Education reported that 88% of U.S. adults were experiencing some form of financial stress at the start of 2026. 88%. That is not a fringe experience. That is the water most people are swimming in. And here is what makes debt uniquely damaging compared to just being low on money. A University of Alabama at Birmingham study found that indebtedness was associated with a 90% increase in the odds of being diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder. Not a correlation that might mean something, 90%. And the research makes clear why that is. Debt is not just a financial condition, it is a cognitive condition. It occupies mental space that should belong to other things. Every time you open your banking app, every time a bill arrives, every time someone mentions a vacation or a wedding or a home renovation, there's a quiet calculation running in the background, a subtraction problem, and the answer is always the same: not yet. So when you make that last payment, what you are doing is not just eliminating a financial obligation. You are turning off that background calculation, and that is a much bigger deal than most people understand while they're still inside it. The first thing that changes, and it changes faster than you'd expect, is how you think about your monthly income. Here's what I mean. While you had debt, every dollar that came in was already partially spoken for. Even if the minimum payment was only $300, the entire emotional weight of the balance hovered over the rest. You didn't actually feel like you had the full paycheck because the paycheck already had a claim on it. The debt had a seat at the table before you sat down. When that seat is empty, money starts to feel different. Not just the amount of it, but the quality of it. Psychologists call this a shift in what they call perceived financial autonomy, which is just a clinical way of describing the feeling that your money actually belongs to you. It is a subtle thing until you experience it, and then it's completely obvious. The same paycheck, arriving the same day, covering the same fixed cost you've always had, just feels different when none of it is already promised to a balance you can't see but always know is there. And practically speaking, something real and measurable happens to your monthly cash flow. The money you were sending to debt payments doesn't disappear. It is still there, in your account, on the day it used to leave. And for most people who've been on an aggressive payoff timeline, that number is not small. If you were putting $500 a month toward debt and now you're not, that's $6,000 a year that is suddenly redirectable. Not earned in addition to what you already make, just freed from a prior claim, just yours for the first time in however long you've been paying. What you do with that freed money in the first 6 months after becoming debt-free will shape your financial life for the next decade. We will come back to that. The second thing that changes is harder to describe, but almost everyone who has done this will recognize it immediately when I name it. You stop dreading things. There is a specific low-level dread that runs underneath daily life when you are carrying debt. It is not always dramatic, it doesn't always announce itself, but it's there in the moment before you open a bank statement. It's there when your car makes a noise you don't recognize. It's there when a friend asks if you want to split a trip next spring and you have to do the mental math you've been doing for years to figure out whether you can say yes. It's there in the half-second pause before you swipe the card for something non-essential, the tiny internal negotiation between wanting something and knowing you probably shouldn't. Paying off the last debt doesn't make those moments disappear immediately, but it changes the answer. The car makes a noise, and instead of your stomach dropping because you don't know how you'd handle a repair bill, there's a different calculation running, one that actually has room. The trip invitation comes, and you do the math, and the math is different now. Ryan Howell, a psychology professor at San Francisco State University, who has studied the connection between debt and emotional well-being, described it this way. He said, real financial stress eats a person's soul in a way that is very different than other parts of life. What he was pointing at is the chronic ambient quality of debt stress. It is not a spike, it is a baseline. And when the baseline drops, people are often surprised by how much lighter the ordinary texture of a day feels. The third change is one that most people don't anticipate, and some find genuinely destabilizing. When you don't have debt to pay off, you have to decide what you actually want. Here's the thing about the debt payoff phase of your financial life. It is an organizing principle. Every extra dollar has a destination. The mission is clear. Every sacrifice, every skipped dinner out, every birthday present you kept modest, every vacation you postponed, all of it was in service of a goal you could see on a balance page. The debt going down was measurable progress. It gave your financial life structure and direction, and the small daily dopamine of watching a number shrink. When the number hits zero, that structure is gone. And for a lot of people, the first few months after becoming debt-free involve a period of financial aimlessness that nobody warned them about. What do you save for now? How much should go to investments? What's the right balance between enjoying the money and building with it? These are good problems to have, but they are still problems, and the lack of an obvious answer can lead people to quietly slide into lifestyle inflation just to fill the void, to let the spending expand to absorb what the debt payments used to take, and to arrive 1 year later at a slightly nicer life, but no more savings than before. The people who come out of debt payoff and actually transform their financial trajectory are the ones who treat the freed cash flow the same way they treated the debt payments, automatically redirected before they get used to having it. The $500 that used to go to debt becomes $500 that goes to a Roth IRA or a brokerage account or a house down payment fund before the lifestyle has a chance to expand to claim it. This is the decision that separates people who got out of debt and eventually drifted back from people who got out of debt and never went back. The fourth shift is social, and it's one that surprises people because they didn't know how much the debt was shaping their social behavior. Bankrate's 2025 Financial Infidelity Survey found that 40% of Americans in committed relationships had kept a money-related secret from their partner. 23% had secretly racked up debt. Debt is not just a financial experience. It is often a private shame, something people carry alone, even from the people closest to them, affecting how they communicate, what they agree to, what they avoid, what they don't bring up. When the debt is gone, something often opens up in those relationships. Conversations about the future become easier. Plans become real instead of theoretical. The secrecy ends because there's nothing left to be secret about. And more broadly, your relationship to social spending changes. You stop making excuses when people suggest something you couldn't really afford before. You stop the quiet performance of being fine financially when you are operating with a lot less room than people assumed. There is a specific specific kind of exhaustion that comes with managing the gap between how you're doing and how you appear to be doing. And when the debt is gone, that gap closes. You can just be where you actually are, and where you actually are is better. The fifth and most lasting change is the relationship you develop with risk. And this one, honestly, is the change that has the most power to alter the entire arc of someone's financial life. Here's what debt does to risk tolerance that people don't fully appreciate. When you have significant debt, you are not free to take the kinds of risks that build wealth. You can't leave the job that's paying the minimum payment. You can't start the business that needs 6 months of runway. You can't let the market dip for a year without anxiety, because your financial stability depends on the monthly income, and the income depends on nothing going wrong. Debt makes you defensive. It has to. You are playing financial defense almost by definition when every month you are servicing a past version of your life's expenses. When the debt is gone, the posture changes. You start playing offense. And the only Americans currently winning at financial offense, statistically, are the ones who are owning assets that compound. The Federal Reserve's data shows that the top 1% of U.S. households hold nearly 32% of all national wealth as of 2025. That gap is not primarily an income gap. It is an asset ownership gap. The people building wealth are the ones investing consistently over decades in equity and real estate and businesses. And you cannot invest consistently over decades when the present is demanding money that should belong to the future. Debt keeps you present tense. Freedom is what lets you go long. This is the quiet revolution that happens after the last payment. It is not just that you have more money, it is that you are now building a completely different relationship with time. Your financial decisions stop being about surviving the current month and start being about designing the next decade. You can think years forward because you are not firefighting the present. And that cognitive shift, that freedom to think in decades rather than pay periods, is worth more than any specific dollar amount. There is one more thing I want to say, because I think it's the most important and it's the one that gets least attention. When you pay off your last debt, you do not just change your financial situation, you change your self-perception in a way that compounds forward. Ryan Howell's research on the psychological dimension of debt found something that stuck with me. Debt carries a uniformly negative stigma and can weaken self-esteem at its root. What that means practically is that being in debt, especially for a long time, subtly teaches you something about yourself. It teaches you that you have less room, less optionality, less margin for error than people who don't carry it. It teaches you that certain choices are not available to you, and over time, even after those choices become available, people don't always reach for them. They've internalized the constraint. They've become the person who can't, even after the external reason for can't is gone. Paying off debt, especially after years of sustained discipline, teaches you the opposite. It teaches you that you can do difficult things consistently over time and eventually finish them. It teaches you that your future is not fixed, that the story can change, and that belief, that actual experiential knowledge that you can change your financial reality through sustained intentional action, that is the thing that makes the next chapter of your financial life different, not just bigger, different in kind. So when you make that last payment and the balance flips to zero and the feeling is quieter and stranger than you expected, what you are actually standing in is the first day of a financial life without a claim on your future. The dread is leaving. The freedom is arriving. The whole game just changed. What you build next is up to you, but you now have the one thing that makes building possible. You have the room.